Hello. Hello, hello, hello. If you aren't able to chat, try subscribing and see if that helps. It's Vincy Lou Who. How are you? Lux. Who is it? Yogi Bear? Is that who I'm thinking about? Ugh. You and Nate are going to be, I don't know if you're going to be disappointed tonight or not. It's a good it's a good chapter. But there are absolutely no speaking parts in this chapter at all. None. No female, no male. I'm just going to read. But it's good. Hello. Who else is with us? Hey, everybody. Come on in and grab a seat. You may have to look, depending on what you're watching on, if you want to chat, you may have to look for a chat button. It's usually hidden somewhere for YouTube. Or if there's not one, you might have to subscribe to my channel. That's usually what we have to tell people in order to get them to chat, for them to be able to chat. Not my rules, but they're there. Oh, yeah, it'd be fine. People keep coming on and disappearing, coming on and disappearing. Next Friday, I can get my hair cut. Buddy, I'm ready. This mess is about to get on my nerves. Mm-hmm. Jay Morgan, you on here, Bubba? Morgan. Where are you? There he is. How are you, my friend? How goes it? I was looking through this chapter, kind of scanning over it, and there are absolutely no speaking parts in this chapter whatsoever. So that means nobody gets to hear my sexy male voice. Or they just get to listen to my one and only sexy female voice. So, look what I have. It's a baseball. It's a squishy baseball. It's full of some kind of gel. It's my stress ball. Reading Jay Morgan stuff stresses me. That right, Bubba? I hope that's the rest of your team that's on there. He doesn't. He doesn't stress me. I'm just giving you a hard time. Maybe it's all the sex stuff. Because yours are the only books I ever read sex out of. So, yeah, it's got to be that. I don't know where she's at. She had a really bad headache, migraine. So I don't know. She may not make it. Folks that are out there in La La Land, if you want to chat and it's not giving you a chat button, you may have to subscribe to my channel in order for it to allow you to chat. So, hey, Miss Valerie, how are you, darling? Doing all right? Is it warm out there in Arizona? It got warm out here today. It's been cool around here, around in the 70s cool, so yay! $103. Dang. It's, if it tells me, it's 87 here right now, which most days it's not even gotten up to that. So, Fancy, did the rain finally move out from your place? Alrighty. So, as I was telling Vincy a while ago, this chapter that I'm going to read tonight is chapter 10. It's actually two scenes. One's just a scene out of the book. The other one is Jay's usual sex scenes. And since I don't do enough sex scenes around here, I thought I'd go ahead and read another one. But for those that are new here, I am Mynae Atkins, and I do live reads. And tonight is going to be J. Morgan Woodall's Rocket City Blues. So there's no speaking parts in this. This is so weird. I don't even have to get my voice ready or anything. So, alrighty, here we go. And I'm starting on chapter 10. This was kind of the type of reading I tend to do lately. So, Special Inspector Matt Burlington was lost. In Stella's apartment, sitting on her bed, he realized for the first time in a long time he didn't know what to do, and it scared him. On an average night in these early morning hours, the special inspector and his executive officer would be finishing up another round of lovemaking, followed by a satisfying cigarette, before falling into a blissful deep sleep. Sometimes, if it had been a particularly eventful day, they might talk a bit of shop, but the night would always end with them spooning, his nose buried in her red hair, his arm around her waist, pulling her possessively into him. The evening search had turned up nothing. She was nowhere to be found. An audit of the apartment complex surveillance system indicated it had been remotely jammed. This tampering had occurred suspiciously around the time she usually arrived home from work. Foul play was all but certain. Of course, the list of suspects was long. Special Inspector Matt Burlington had made a lot of enemies during his ambitious and illustrious career of crime fighting in the Rocket City. Several people came to mind immediately who would want to get back at him. Organized crime figures, smugglers, rapists, murderers. It could have even been the relatives of someone he'd killed in the line of duty or sent off to Penal 1. Hell, the list was endless. Cutter Hawkins? Possibly, but it didn't seem his style. He didn't build a criminal enterprise the size of his by making stupid decisions like kidnapping a zip. Especially Burlington's right-hand woman and lover. He knew Matt well enough to know the hell he would rain down on his illegal ventures. Cutter knew such an idiotic move would be bad for business. The Tuttles? They were bullies and cutthroats, but they weren't enough brains between the three of them to pull off something this coordinated, especially since most of Rayford's had been blown off and he now lay in a medically induced coma. Old man Gideon's forte was peddling moonbeam to ULA recipients and pimping out young girls. Junior did whatever his demented daddy told him. Electronic countermeasures would be a stretch for them. In his mind, he kept coming back to the bounty hunter Frost. Of all people, he had the means, the technology, and the manpower to abduct Stella. But why? Simply because Matt had dressed him down at the spaceport? He doubted Frost was the type to waste resources just to settle a slot, not unless he could gain something by it. But what other bird would he want to kill with one stone? He would have to find the man to get that answer, and he too had disappeared. Zip troopers had found his team rather quickly, holed up at a motel. There was no sign of their leader. According to them, he'd returned to Atlanta, but Matt wasn't buying it. His gut told him that if he found Frost, he would find Stella. He pulled a cig out of the pack and lit one. He didn't know if he was trying to calm his nerves or just needed something to do because he didn't know what to do. He placed his hand on the bed, on the spot where she always laid. He ran his palm over the covers lightly. On any other night, she would be there right now, lying in his arms, holding her tight. All would be right. For hours, he'd fought to deny his own emotions, but now, here alone, there wasn't any need to fight it anymore. He allowed the fear to manifest itself, pure and unfettered. It gripped his gut like a cold fist, twisting it into a knot. It was a strange emotion. He'd never been one to be afraid. A man in his position couldn't afford to be. Fear caused doubt, hesitation. Fear got you killed. It felt like the tentacles of a monster spreading out inside him, uncoiling and reaching into every part of his being and soul. His biggest fear wasn't that he would never see her again. A cop lived with the reality every second of his existence. No, his biggest fear was not getting the chance to make things right by her. He had been an ass to her at the hospital without cause or reason. He owed her an apology for that. But he knew deep down that he owed her even more. He'd always tried to tell himself it'd never been anything more than the sex. It was easier that way. He was still a married man, and he was still her superior officer. The more he allowed feelings and emotions to enter into the relationship, the more it complicated everything. And it was complicated enough. Both were already risking far too much. If their superiors found out, the damage to their careers could be significant, something Matt feared greatly, considerably more than Stella. He'd recently separated from his wife and started preliminary divorce proceedings. The last thing he needed now was for her attorney to get wind of an affair. Talk about being behind the eight ball. He took a drag off his cigarette, held it, then blew it out long and slow, his eyes closed in deep reflection. It was too late, and he knew it. There was no longer any sense in denying it. He was in love with Stella and had been for some time. He just never had the balls to tell her. He'd been a selfish, gutless prick who chose ambition and self-preservation over her. And now it might be too late. He crushed his cigarette out in the ashtray on the nightstand, usually reserved for those after-sex smokes. His hand moved to her pillow, pulling it to him. He buried his face in it, breathing in the scent of her perfume, her hair. He inhaled it like a dying man needing oxygen, as it conjured up images of her, memories of good times they'd had. It gave him strength for the moment. It gave him hope. The first light of morning sun peeking through the slight crack in the curtains found him still desperately clutching her pillow. All right. Luna tossed and turned for an hour and a half, unable to sleep and unable... Nina, you just happened to get here, huh? What timing? What do you think, Nancy? Lula tossed and turned for an hour and a half, unable to sleep and unable to ignore the rigid sensitivity of her hard nipples and the persistent wetness between her legs. Her fingers had done all they could to assuage the aching a couple of times earlier, but overall, they'd proven ineffective. Every time she closed her eyes, the vixen was there in front of her, naked, sexy, and needing relief herself. The thing that stuck in her mind by now, those pheromones Amber had let loose upon her hours earlier and had probably worn off. The desires she now harbored were untainted and genuine, and they were all hers. Around midnight, she decided to go to the restroom, or maybe her intended destination had been the kitchen and a glass of water. Afterward, she really couldn't remember. She threw the covers off her naked body and sat up in bed. It seemed hot in the house, and she told the home control system to adjust the temperature down a degree. She ran a hand through her long brown hair, closed her eyes, and leaned her head back, letting the immediate rush of cool air from the vent wash over her. It felt good on her bare skin, giving her goosebumps and making her nipples pucker even harder. Without thinking, her fingers found one and began pulling and squeezing it. She moaned to herself, and then she got the feeling. The one you get when you feel like you're being watched. How long had she been standing there, just inside the doorway, leaning against the wall? Damn, she moved like a cat. Lula found herself miffed somewhat that the girl had slipped into her room uninvited, but the irritation evaporated like frost in the sunlight when she took in the vixen's nude form in the moonlight that streamed through the window. It was the first time she had seen another woman naked in almost 2 decades, and she knew right then it'd been too long. If there'd been any doubt before how she might react, those questions were answered immediately. The vixen's body was as comely and shapely as she'd imagined it to be in the dozens of lurid fantasies she'd entertained that day. Of course, it hadn't been too hard to piece together some idea of what might lie beneath a paper thin t shirt and a pair of super short Daisy Duke cutoffs. Still, seeing it now in all its natural glory was well worth the wait. It was no wonder the creature had seduced Tiger. She was genetically engineered for nothing more than to be fucked. Her body was perfect. Now remember, this is sci-fi. 4 breasts, just the right size, not too big, just perky enough with nipples slightly oversized. But then again, why wouldn't they be? Just below them, her pleasing little tummy led like a creamy trail down to the promise of glistening, dewy delight between those gorgeous thighs. Even the slight indentation of her navel beckoned for attention. Lulu would make sure she got it. She would make sure a lot of things got the attention they deserved. She was off the bed and moving before she fully comprehended what she was doing. Amber met her halfway at the foot of the bed, their mouths colliding, open and desperate, needy and hungry to taste the other. Their bodies were not far behind, their breasts pressing against the others as arms wrapped and squeezed. Hands were everywhere, rubbing, palming, and squeezing. Lula's finally found the way to Amber's cheeks. She held her face as she kissed the vixen passionately, doing her best to extend her tongue as far back into the girl's mouth as she physically could. She moaned into Amber's mouth as she felt one hand on her left ass cheek and the other slide between her legs, a finger slipping easily into the slick, wet furrow that needed much more attention. She didn't know if Amber pushed her, if she stumbled backward, or if her knees simply buckled. But suddenly she was flat on her back on the bed. Amber was atop her immediately, their mouths never disengaging. Lula knew she had her hands full. The vixen was a spitfire, full of sexual energy, fueled by pheromones and the feel of another woman beneath her. Buttercup had been soft and sensual, like kissing a delicate rose. Kissing Amber was like fighting off kudzu in heat. She was everywhere, smothering, entwining, and all pleasing. She slid her way down slightly, straddling Lula's leg like a saddle, using her weight to pull it sideways, opening her up for better access. Her talented fingers wasted no time in finding Lula's sweet spot. With grace and skill, they began working steadily in the ever increasing wet mess that was now the woman's crotch. Her first two fingers moved in and out feverishly as her willing victim moaned and began grinding her hips against the vixen's hands, the combination of juices and movement making sloppy, delicious smacking noises. Lula had her first orgasm the moment the fox girl's lips enclosed around her right nipple and sucked it into her mouth. Her eyes bulged, and despite herself, she let loose with a part growl, part moan. It expelled from her lungs as if someone had punched her in the stomach. Her head came off the bed, eyes screwed shut, the intensity overwhelming her. I knew you two were going to love this. Nancy, tell Nina about the voices. She lay panting, breathless, and wrung out, but Amber gave no quarter. She moved rapidly down her torso, and before Lula could stage any kind of weak protest, a wet, probing tongue replaced the slick fingers at her pussy. Steady and determined digits spread her open, allowing Amber full access to everything she desired. And she desired everything. Amber's mouth moved with manic speed, her tongue fluttering like a hummingbird's wings over Lula's clit before her lips closed on it, sucking it like a red, ripe berry. Suddenly, she was probing deep inside, her tongue seemingly longer than average, moving inside Lou, slathering her velvety walls with passionate slobber. Her fingers moved down even lower, and she pushed the woman's pelvis upward. Lula at first gasped in utter shock as she felt the lovely tongue rimming her puckered brown rose just south of her drenched pink heaven. Her initial reaction was dismay, and her body tensed instinctively. But it was only momentary. It was utterly mind-numbing at how deliciously sensual it felt. She felt her body relax, and she gave in to the disturbingly naughty new indulgence. Lila was mush now, like some kind of melted ooze, as the feeling of having her pussy and ass both pleasured made her feel somehow lighter than air. Between the whimpers and moans, she called out for the house to play music. She wanted to hear that new group, the Bastard Sons of Skinnerd. They actually played real instruments like those bands hundreds of years ago. Guitars, drums, even piano, not synthesizers, but a real old-fashioned, old-timey honky-tonk piano. People seemed to dig this new old sound. It was refreshing. She had taken a liking to a soulful little number called Rocket City Blues. Every time she heard it, she was reminded of Tiger. I am a rambling spacer, a cockpit I call home. My lonely woman, I haven't held her in so long. I miss the muddy brown waters of the mighty Tennessee. I miss her blue skies. I miss the grass so green. 3 weeks left out of 3 weeks left on this run, but what more can I do? Somewhere between Earth and Mars, I've got those Rocket City blues. Oh, Lord Jesus, help me. I've got those Rocket City blues. She closed her eyes and allowed the wailing and crying of dual electric guitars, solos, and the vixen's insistent tongue take her away. It was like an out of body experience, and she seemed to float above the bed, wafted along on the music and ecstasy. At that moment, with Amber's talented mouth busy at her crotch, coaxing her toward the ultimate pleasure and doing it to a Southern rock revivalist soundtrack, she found herself in a moment of complete and utter contentment. The vixen was indeed seductive. Even now, the furry little sex pot almost made her forget she was a middle aged mother of two. Like Cutter, Amber's touch brought out a side of her she had always kept hidden. Not necessarily because she wanted to, but because she felt it was expected of her. She was a mother and prominent businesswoman with great responsibility. Priorities. Always fucking priorities. Still, if time were to freeze in some weird Wednesday kind of way right now, and she would forever be locked in the moment she was in now, with an anthropomorphic tongue teasing her ass and fucking her pussy, well, so be it. She denied herself these inhibited desires long enough. She spent her life being the woman everyone else had expected her to be. Her ex, Cutter, her family, even Tiger to an extent. For the moment, she was Lula Carter, a sexual creature, just like the vixen servicing her. Tomorrow, she would be Carter, loving mom and middle management drone for Shooting Star Express. But tonight, Amber spread her wide and tongue-lashed loose pleasure snub with an enthusiasm that caught the woman off guard. She felt herself go, like an avalanche of snow perched precariously on a mountainside, giving way without warning, flaking her hips like a green broke Mustang. Her hand sought out her pleasurer's head, needing desperately to hold that lovely face right where it was. The first thing she got her hand on was a furry, pointy ear, and she grabbed hold, pulling it to her until the left found the mane of luscious, thick hair, and she buried her fingers in it. As her pussy clenched and throbbed, she yowled and pressed Amber's face mercilessly into the wet, pulsating mess. The anthro seemed to relish the persistent urging of her lover thoroughly. She happily continued licking and sucking, even as Lou eventually went super sensitive, begging for mercy and finally pushing her away with as much force as she had just used to hold her in place. But once again, there would be no reprieve for the tireless wonder that was the furry dynamo. Lifting Lula's left leg, she straddled the right one, sliding her wet, swollen lips down it, leaving a delicious trail of fox juice along the top of Lula's thigh. She laid Lula's shapely calf against her right shoulder, then leaned her torso back and twisted slightly. She slid her groin in against Lula's. Both women's eyes bulged as wetness contacted wetness, and Amber began to wickedly grind her pussy against her partner's as she looked down hungrily from above. Well, this is new. Lula and Buttercup had never gotten this wild. Not that she was complaining. The feel of another pussy's love juice all over hers, their fluids mixing in a slick, licentious smear of unbridled decadence was breathtaking. It would be quite challenging to come in this position, given the lack of direct and constant pressure on her clit, but damn, there was just something about how it felt. God, it felt good. The vixen was fucking her. Of course, the vixen had no problem getting off bumping muffs. In a matter of minutes, she experienced a nice little climax. Figures. Lula fought back the jealousy as she watched the beautiful creature arch its back and thrust its pussy even harder against her own. Hell, she could probably come if you blew on it hard. She's a manufactured orgasm machine. And look how sexy she looks doing it. So graceful. No goofy faces. No carrying on or crude profanity. Just closes her eyes and whimpers a little. But if she thought Amber were a selfish lover, she was about to be pleasantly surprised. She felt Amber release her leg and let it fall, but keeping it bent at the knee. She just as quickly rolled to her left, throwing her left thigh over Lula's pelvis while sliding her right into the crook of the woman's leg, right up against her ass. Her head and body were now pointing in the opposite direction of Lula's. Amber wickedly pressed her pussy flush against hers. Now that was better. Definitely better. Granny's Jesus. Lula fought with everything in her not to scream out as she pushed back against the grinding, hunching, orange and white beauty that now was providing adequate and steady pressure to her clit. She knew if she vented her pleasure the way she wanted, it'd no doubt wake the kids, and this glorious, fantastic night would be over. Tex would probably figure it out, PDQ, and allow them to maintain their privacy. But Brett would be in there in a heartbeat. Talk about awkward. She found herself flailing, grabbing at the sheets, knotting them in her fist as she hunched her lover wildly now. It wasn't the ideal position, and with both women gyrating wildly, it was hard to keep repetitious pressure in the same spot. But it felt spectacular, and she was never one to shy away from working for a good cream. To her, that was half the fun. The climax would get there soon enough. She liked to enjoy the ride, too. She raised her head up, staring down at the kinky little scene taking place at the junction of their two bodies. Despite previous misgivings, she found herself thoroughly enjoying watching the vixen in action. The way those four breasts bounced was almost hypnotic. That sexy little tummy working like ripples across the pond, and her pussy, the wet, hot pussy. It felt absolutely divine moving against hers. Velvety, soft, and baby oil slick. Amber's heavy lidded eyes caught hers, and in the moonlight, their glances locked on each other. Once again, Lula realized she was looking into the face of a woman. It was hard not to see Amber as a creature, manufactured in a lab for a specific purpose. More animal than human. Yes, she was adept at this. But what did that make her? Was she nothing more than a toy to be used by whoever had possession of her? Her original owner, Tiger, Lula? She now saw past that, past the fur and the canine nose and the golden eyes. At that very moment, she saw with some kind of x-ray vision the woman underneath it all. And she was indeed beautiful. She didn't need pheromones or four tits or pointy ears to be desirable. Underneath the soft white down, beauty was indeed skin deep. Lula felt herself grow wetter as the two shared the moment in the darkness without a word. In her groin, the persistent rubbing had finally started kindling a fire, but she needed more contact, more intimacy. It was time for her to take the initiative. She spun around and climbed atop the vixen. Amber seemed slightly surprised by this, but she did not resist, a slight little smile turning up the corners of her pretty little mouth. Lila moved up on her on all fours, her heavy breast hanging enticingly as she brought them up to Amber's face. Amber didn't need any coaxing as she took a puckered nipple in her mouth, sucking it greedily. Lula threw her head back and screwed her eyes tightly shut, a muffled moan escaping despite her best efforts to remain quiet. It became even harder when the vixen took the breast in her hands, nursing like a young child, squeezing and kneading. So hot, so naughty. She allowed her to service both breasts more than adequately before sliding back down and dropping to her elbow, allowing her to press her body against Amber's. They now lay mirror opposite, face to face, breast to breast, and groin to groin, and now swollen clit to swollen clit. Her face broke into a sly little grin of her own as she began to grind. Even Amber let out a surprised little gasp as the sharp sensation of nub moving directly against nub caught her off guard. Her eyes rolled back as her arms moved down the small of Lula's back to her nicely rounded ass. Claws dug gently into twin cheeks, spurring her on, as if she needed any encouragement. It didn't take long to reignite the fire. Being on top and in control only enhanced the sensation. Now she was fucking Amber. She was going to come again, and this time she was going to come all over her lover's deliciously wet sex. Fuck. This was so hot. Her juices were mixing with Amber's. She found that so erotic. She also loved the feeling of controlling the movements, the intensity of it. She was the one bringing on the cum now. She wondered if this was how Tiger or Cutter felt right before they came in her, this feeling of dominance and control. She found herself saying something similar to what she'd been told so many times before. Oops, I lied. Here is a speaking part. Oh, fuck, Amber. I'm going to come on your pussy. It was the stroke of the paddle that sent her over the falls. She convulsed atop the vixen, the throbbing eruption of pleasure in her groin spreading up through her belly, setting her whole body on fire. The beautiful creature under her would join her seconds later. They writhed together as one sensual, beautiful being until the waves of the tsunami subsided. Afterward, they laid in each other's arms, each holding the other in desperation until they fell asleep. Sometime in the wee morning hours, Amber woke to the delicious feeling of a tongue and soft lips between her legs. She yawned lazily, smiled and smiled as she glanced up at the ceiling clock. There was still several hours before daylight and the kids waking. Plenty of time. I see you in hues of blue, rocketing my heart through a nebula of emotions. We are an equinox, searching for dimension only shared by the two brightest stars. Starlight, Star Bright by Midsummer Lane. And that's the end of part 1. What you guys think? I think Jay Morgan might know a little bit about sex. And apparently definitely sex between two women. Damn, I didn't even know half of that. Hey, Pebbles. Honey, it started off this way just about. You think? Who knew, huh? Who would have thunk it? How are you, my lady? So, again, this is Rocket City Blues, and it is. Hold on. Let me go back to the beginning of the book. I'll read you a little bit about. It's inspired by the TV series Firefly, which I kind of wondered about that when I saw the front. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to read you the introduction, and this kind of gives you a little starting ground. 3 years ago, when I released the first book in the series, Like a Fox on the Run, I never imagined it'd take almost 3 years to get to this point. But other adventures and other stories clamored to be released from the asylum that is my imagination, and before I knew it, the time had slipped away. But here we are now, and Tiger, Lula, Amber, and the gang are finally back. For those of you who have long awaited this, I hope it will have been worth the wait. I feel like I owe my faithful readers who've been so very patient something extra special. I've tried to build you a hot rod, fast, powerful, and sexy. Vanessa, as always, did a great job on the cover. It looks good on the outside. I hope it's got the horses under the hood to satisfy. So here are the keys. Take her out. The universe of the Southern Sci-Fi Chronicles beckons once again. Come inside and see what the future holds in store. I think you're going to be surprised. My fervent hope is that it's a pleasant one. Thanks for being patient. It won't take 3 years to get the next one. Now, let's light this candle. Thank you, J. Morgan Woodall. Alrighty. I don't have the deets on this, so if somebody can, Valerie or Jay, if one of you can give the deets on this. Amazon, how much? You're more than welcome, darling. Anytime, anytime. Okay, here we go. It's free on KU. Free on KU. Or it's $3.49 to buy. And it's book 2 of the Southern Sci-Fi Chronicles. The first one is also free on KU. So go gets it, reads them. I might have to read these. I'm not usually a sci-fi person. These look kind of interesting. Although I did like Firefly. I prefer to watch my sci-fi as to reading it, and that's very unusual because I usually don't like to watch a lot of TV. So. Now, is there going to be a third one, Jay? How many books are going to be in this series? Valerie, do you know? I may have lost Jay. Oh, there's Tanya. Hey, darling. Agreed. Agreed. Cat, there you are, you little heifer. Why are you just now showing up on here? All right, Tanya, do you know if there's how many books are going to be in this series? I was just curious. Some people like to know. I prefer to wait until all the books in the series are written and then read them. Don't always get to do that, but I prefer that. All right, everybody. I want you guys to have a wonderful, those here in America, in the US, have a wonderful 4th of July. Be safe. People around the world, please don't gather in large groups. Please don't. And be careful around family. I do not want your family being one of these that's losing half the family at one smack. I mean, this is breaking my heart. So please be safe. Practice good, safe social distancing. Wear your mask. Just be safe, okay? Because it's not just about you. It is not just about you. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. I love you guys and happy reading.